Hey everybody, welcome to the BAMP podcast. I'm Jason Tondro, and I'm here with a very special guest, my friend and co-worker, Jason Keeley. Welcome.
Hello. Good morning.
Keeley and I sit normally in normal situations when the world is not on fire.
Yeah.
We sit 6 feet apart.
Yep.
In the cubicle at Paizo.
We were the leaders on the social distancing front, staying 6 feet away from each other at all times.
Except for me rolling over all the time to ask you for it.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And the same.
So I wanted to bring you on the show so we could talk about your latest adventure path. The Threefold Conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first adventure. This is the Chimera Mystery.
Yeah.
And last 2 weeks ago, I had Chris Sims on, and we talked about kind of the early stages of this AP. But of course, Sims left halfway through the AP, and you, as the other full-time developer, got brought on to sort of pick up where he left off and finish it off. And then, but of course, you did Attack of the Swarm, and you did Signal of Screams.
Yeah.
So you've got a ton of work at Paizo. But maybe I would just kind of start off a little bit earlier.
Sure.
Like, how did you get into this business? Like, what's your professional RPG start?
Just kind of weirdly, when I had was before all this, I was working for a company that made puzzles, crossword puzzles and word seeks and logic puzzles and that sort of thing. And I was a big RPG fan. And I decided to, a friend of mine, my dog is coming closer. I might be able to grab him. Nope. Okay. A friend of mine convinced me to let's just start writing some stuff and putting it out there because you can. We funneled some money into a small company and started writing stuff basically. Pantheon Press, now defunct, but still, yes, that was our second effort. But we started with D20 stuff. As a matter of fact, pretty much just as 3.5 was ending and Pathfinder was starting. We started. We wrote yes. This is just the sort of player's guide for a campaign setting called Nobis, where you kind of want to tell here. This guy, this guy has a gun. On his back. So we introduced firearms. This is a knoll, which we made a playable race off the bat. So it was basically this sort of city states, and it was very Renaissance feel. We added some fencing rules and some other stuff in here. This is just the player stuff. There was a whole full campaign setting, and then I wrote an adventure for it, which is you can see there's my name at the bottom. And it's a very Shakespeare-inspired kind of thing where you have to protect a playwright whose works are too forward-thinking and inflammatory because some assassins are sent to kill him. So you basically there's a whole part because at the time, myself, I was a bit of a theater nerd in college.
I'm shocked.
And my theater nerd, some of my theater nerd friends brought me into role playing. I had never actually role played until after college. And then Force, I played video games and stuff like that, and maybe once or twice in high school. But it really brought me in Force. It's sort of like, oh, I know all these people from the Renaissance Fair and who do theater. Let's game. And I'm like, come over. And it was mostly just us goofing around gaming. And so
my dogs are putting on a show in the background.
Yeah, they're growling. And one of the other people that I brought on to work with, who was always our GM in this, was a fellow by the name of Jay Stratton, who basically was a theater. He teaches theater now, and directing and stuff like that. But so we made this sort of there's an audition piece in here, basically. So we wrote the idea of the play is like, oh, you want to protect this guy, you got to go undercover, so become part of the theater troupe, basically. And that's the premise. And it's first level adventure. I don't know if any of this stuff is available anywhere.
Yeah, sure.
I might have. I don't even know if I have the PDFs at this point. I've moved so much.
That's how we learn how to do all this stuff. I mean, I had a similar experience when I got into the open gaming license market. Mm-hmm. I did an adventure based on Julius Caesar.
Right.
For D20. So you and I lettered in theater in high school. So you and I have very similar interests.
We got a lot of common.
Yeah. Go ahead.
from there, I want to bring up Fortune's Fool, which we decided to. Some things happened, and we decided to sort of like at this point sort of branch off. We had a one or two other sort of small like PDF only things for our setting, but we decided to branch off and make our own game at that point because my friend Jay Stratton was always writing his own games. We didn't play Vampire the Masquerade. We played his vampire game. We didn't play Deadlands. We played his Western occult game. Right.
Yeah.
And so we put this thing together. We got this idea around making it a game based around tarot cards.
Yep.
We toyed with the setting left and right, and we also decided to go with a sort of a Renaissance setting on that one because it was just sort of like, well, what we'll do is something familiar to people. Elves and dwarves and humans and whatnot, but also set it in a world that is our world, but different with fantasy. So that's where Fortune's Fool comes from.
Yeah.
That one I have. I'm pretty proud of like the majority of how that came out. There's some stuff I would change because that game is like over 10 years old at this point.
Yeah.
And it won an Emmy, Judge's Choice Emmy, which I'm very proud of.
Congratulations, man! That's awesome.
That was the year too that all of us who were going to Gen Con for half business, half fun decided to stop going to the Emmys because we weren't nominated for anything that year, so we just didn't go. And then I found out later that we got a Judge's Choice.
That's fantastic.
So, like I think through the internet, basically through Twitter.
Isn't it ironic? Rain on your wedding day.
There's a little bit of rain on a wedding day. And from there, we put out some more PDF stuff. We put out a campaign, basically an adventure path, and another setting where we took a look at what was going on in the Indian subcontinent at the time, and with the help of some of my friends. One of the writers of Signal Screams, Saif Ansari, sort of did some consulting with us and helped us out a little bit there. So, but at that point we were learning about getting sensitivity readers and stuff like that.
Was this all for Fortune's Fool? You said you did an adventure path. Was that for? That's
for Fortune's Fool. It's a campaign set of adventures that are based around nursery rhymes and fairy tales, basically. Essentially, it's called Grimm Tales with 2 M's because it's based around Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm.
Yeah,
and what happens if they were also monsters or something like that. I don't want to give it away. If you managed to find it and play it, it was good fun. My our other sort of business partner in this, Rob Tremarco, when we play tested it, he got eaten by one of the three bears. So I think even the baby bear, he got killed. He got criticaled and killed by the baby bear, and it was very, very, very frustrating.
That porridge was just right.
Yes, porridge was just death.
So then from there, you came.
From there, basically, I started thinking about moving away from New York, getting out. I was still working in the crossword business at that point, and I started thinking about. I applied for a couple jobs in various role-playing game companies, and
I should note here at this point that you do a puzzle of the day on the wall.
Yes, I used to.
Which was proven so hard that it became puzzle of the week because it took us 7 days to solve it.
Yes, essentially, yeah. Our coworker Joe Piscini and I are doing puzzles, and he does some of the puzzles for the puzzle of the day. We worked together more at the beginning and then I just sort of started going off. But him and I started to have been doing a lot of cryptic crossword puzzles. You can check it out.
Yeah,
plugs later on.
We're gonna link your Twitter in the show notes for this, but it's Hers Weston. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So from there, and basically, I applied a couple times, to some different positions. I actually applied into Paizo and didn't get it because it was a short-term contractor position, and then James Sutter, who was sort of editor head at the time, said basically, we don't want you to move all the way out here for something that might only last 6 months, but start doing freelance. Contact these people. So I started doing freelance. I started actually doing some writing. I wrote for Player Companion and maybe that might be a couple monsters. Maybe I don't really remember.
This is all for you.
Yeah, this is all for first edition.
Yep.
And then I entered the RPG Superstar contest because at that point I hadn't had enough credits with Paizo to disqualify me.
Which has recently been reborn.
Yes. by a friend of the company, I would say. Stephen Glicker, and Roll for Combat, and he's basically licensing that from Paizo, I would say. And from there, there happened to be also at the same time another job opening at Paizo, so I applied for that. That was actually for a developer position.
Oh, okay. And
so I took the developer test. I had previously taken the editing test, and luckily for me, half the developer test is the editing test. So I just kind of I cheated a little bit and sort of like, oh, I already did this. It's the exact same stuff. I already know what's repeat that work. And from there, halfway through that, as I was sort of moving through the RPG Superstar contest and getting to, I don't know, the third round or something like that.
Yep.
Again, Sutter contacted me and he was like, okay, I also know, I know you're in the developer, going for the developer position, but I also know that we're going to have an editor position open up, and I will just straight up offer that to you if you want to. Oh, there goes my dog.
Good.
So he's like, you can wait. I'm really going into great detail and showing all the behind the curtain stuff, but he basically said you can try to see how you do for the developer position, or you can just take this editing position. And I was like, I'm going to take the guaranteed job for something. Yeah, for something at the time that I felt was more in my wheelhouse and the editing, because that's basically what I had been doing in my other jobs. So that's it. And then I moved here 5 years ago, basically. Moved to Seattle. Yeah.
And you, so that you've been actually at the company longer than I thought. So you must have been an editor for a good couple of years then before Starfinder.
It was about a year and a half, 2 years.
Did you come onto the Star Chamber before the release of Starfinder?
Yes, like after it had been conceived and started to form. I was brought on to sort of help out. At that point, it was weird because I was just sort of slowly starting to become a developer. I actually developed a couple of player companions while Owen, who was the head of that line, Owen Casey Stevens was the head of that line at the time, was working on Starfinder. So they brought me in for a couple of those things as sort of a developer tryout. And
because Joe Piscini, our coworker in the Star Chamber, who's now lead designer on Starfinder, he had a similar experience where he said, like I was officially an editor, but then I started to develop things. I have not seen us do that at all over the last couple of years.
I don't. It's a weird process. It just sort of happens. You almost like you kind of get asked if you have got to. Sometimes it has to do with like, oh, we have all these. We have some space. We need somebody to develop something, and we didn't want to necessarily go outside the company at the time, and so it was just sort of like, well, it was known by me that I had at least done fairly well on the development test. So it's like, oh, Keeley could probably do it. And I was like, oh, sure, I'll do some stuff. And I think Joe may have fully expressed interest in that at some point too. So to our boss, Judy Bauer, and
who is fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. I've worked with her the whole 5 years, and I that's the one. In a weird way, I that's one of the things I miss about being an editor. It's essentially like having Judy as a boss.
Yes.
Not that our bosses aren't great.
Of course not.
If you're listening, they're not listening.
I agree. When I moved from editorial to Starfinder, the one thing that I regret is losing Judy as a boss, because she was so wonderful. No, but you said you came to Paizo thinking that editor was more in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And yet here you are a few years later as a developer. Did you change your mind? And what caused that?
I think what I discovered that development is a very technical form of editing. That I, at least the way I approach it, and it is something that I felt like I was sort of doing as an editor anyway.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, just sort of like, this doesn't, just looking at stuff, I'm like, well, this doesn't quite seem right, or this doesn't make sense to me as a game rule or a game term, and talking to developers through stuff like that. And not to say that editors shouldn't do that, because I personally think they should. If an editor comes to me and it's like, this doesn't make any sense, what this means is that this does nothing as a game rule. I'm like, you're right, it doesn't do anything. What the heck? Let's make that work. From my prior experience working on Nobis and Fortune's Fool, I had think about game design. I had a thing. There was a thing, sort of an unofficial collective, I would call it, that worked together with a couple friends of mine in New York City called the Imagination Sweatshop, where we would help. We would basically sort of like, because being in sort of nerd community, new game designers, right? I'm good friends with Ebediah Ravishall, creator of Dread, and him and I and a friend of ours, Jim Sullivan. We just sort of did this thing where we would do what we call play storming, which is like, bring us whatever you've got of your game, and we'll play it in whatever shape it is, and we'll help you figure out what the next step is.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, the three of us also, along with Emily Care Boss, creator of the sort of these romance trilogy of games. I don't know if you've heard of them: Breaking the Ice and Shooting the Moon, and a couple other games, obviously. But a bunch of us would get together when Emily was, I think, running or being a very part of something called JiffyCon in Western Massachusetts. We would get together and create a game in a week. Basically, go to game in a jiffy. We would plot. We'd start from scratch. Like, what do we want this game to be about? Let's do it. And then we would write it and sort of play test a little bit, lay it out, edit it in about a week's time, right before, and then release it at this con, because we would all go up there. We made a couple fun games for that, which are available for free online.
This was all when you were living in New York?
Yeah.
Yeah, right on. Where can we find these Jiffy games?
I believe you can find them on Epi's website, Dig a Thousand Holes Publishing, somewhere on there. If you search for a game called Trial and Terror, you'll probably find it. The other game we wrote is a game called Monkey Dome, which became the basis for Epi's Swords and Sorcery game, Swords Without Master, which is out there, available. And his Swords and Sorcery scene, Worlds Without Master, issue 3, which I did editing on. So I'm still doing editing.
You know everybody, man.
I know people. Yeah. It's funny. I think Rob McCreary once said, "You've done a lot more stuff than I thought you have," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm quietly got my fingers all over the place."
It's
yes, that was gross. Paula looked at me and said that was a weird thing to say, and I agree. I don't have my fingers all over the place. I have my fingers in lots of pies, which is somehow less gross.
I think you said the exact same thing to me after my interview or something.
It is true, yeah. When you're like, I wrote this game about King Arthur, I was like, I had no idea. That's great.
Yeah. All right. So you came to Paizo. You move into Starfinder. You're editing, or no? You were developing Starfinder before it came out.
Yeah, I did work on the core rulebook and sort of started the process on what the first Alien Archive it was, and same with Pact Worlds. Basically, started. I didn't like a lot of the projects at the beginning. I didn't have any sort of like input in before they started. In the outlining phase, and the concepting phase. It was just like here's all the turnover. Make it good. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, which is very much my experience over the last few months when I first came.
Sure, yeah.
We had a lot of stuff kind of getting turned in for Threefold Conspiracy back matter and stuff like that. It was like, okay, but it was a super great learning experience. Like, you need the manuscripts to work with and you learn a lot. Yeah. But then was Signal of Screams your first chance to really create something new for Starfinder?
Yes, pretty much. Yeah, I developed the last 2 volumes of Dead Sons and the Against the Iron Throne. But Against the Iron Throne outline was written by Rob McCreary, and although I think I was the one who got the freelancers out, the authors basically. So I started reaching out. I was like, oh, this is my first time assigning something.
Yeah.
But the first time I created something from scratch was the Signal of Screams. Yeah.
So you did all the freelance contracting on Eon Throne.
Yeah.
But then you got to go into the pitch room and pitch a horror trilogy.
Yeah, exactly.
How did that happen? Like, did it come out how you wanted it to come out? Like, now that it's a couple years behind us, are you happy with it?
I'm happy with it. I think that if things were different, I think I would have reversed the order of those, at least in terms of, because those 2 volumes are the first 3-volume APs that Paizo have ever done.
And the 3-volume format has been really well received by fans.
Yeah, I think so. But they also can follow one another. So that was the sort of the process. The pitch was that, well, we'll make these 6 volumes that you can play from 1 to 6, but you can also start. They're 2 different stories.
Yeah.
Just because a horror AP, I feel, works slightly better as a low-level thing, and going up against the Galactic Star Empire of Evil should maybe be a slightly higher level thing. But
I think you're right. Yeah, you're right. We should have flipped those.
But at the time, I didn't have it probably wasn't the right time to do a horror, like the second AP. The horror would be a horror one. That probably would have been a mistake. But if other things had been different, and if I had been sort of in the process sooner, it would have been. I would have said, well, let's do the horror one first, and then move on to the higher level one for.
Interesting. Well, it's a fantastic trilogy of adventures. It's got great villains, and it's got a bunch of very useful game advice for GMs on how to run horror games. It's got a bunch of horror sort of character and class options in it. Everything from themes to new class features and corruption powers and all kinds of crazy stuff. And the 3 adventures are very different in their tone to me. Yeah. So they're different kinds of horror. Yeah. To me.
There's a sort of the through line of the corruption and the psychological horror, but they each have a sort of slightly different tone to them in terms of like what specific kinds of like horror. Yeah.
And because there are advantages to it being higher level. I mean, what level? What, like
it is
12? Yeah. Yeah. You get to use really kind of over the top horror monsters in it, right?
Yeah.
Really crazy shit in there. So that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, you get to throw in the Shadow Giants, bring the Shadow Giants into Starfinder and stuff like that. And so that was good and fun. So yeah, I'm happy with the way it turned out. It definitely has a good Hellraiser kind of vibe to it in a lot of places.
Yeah, that was always what I thought was sort of the main inspiration for it.
It totally was. I mean, yeah. And it's got a great piece of art where it's just a giant heart floating in space and Sunrise Maiden coming up to it, and that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, right on. So then Sims develops the one that comes after that. Is that Dawn of Flame?
That's Dawn of Flame, right? Yeah.
And then you do Attack of the Swarm. Now, I have heard this story that the idea was to do a sort of Starship Troopers military style campaign.
Right.
And you were like, okay, well, but if I do it, it's going to be the way I do it.
Yeah, it's going to get weird. It's basically weird. What I said. Well, I think, I guess it's just that my temperament is to make it weird. Because we're in a weird space fantasy game, right?
Yeah.
So
you and I both use the word gonzo to describe.
Yeah. Exactly. And a good 6-volume military only campaign would, to be perfectly frank, get boring for me.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not to say that it couldn't be done by someone else who had that more of a background and more of that sort of temperament. But I wanted to have a reason for, I guess I wanted to have a special reason for the Swarm to attack the places that they are attacking in the AP. Instead of it just being, it's a Swarm invasion, you fight it off, the end. Like, I just wanted to be have slightly higher stakes than that.
Well, this is also important and I think good, and I'm glad that you made those additions, because when I first looked at Attack of the Swarm, I was kind of disappointed because it was this sort of fringe planet in near space, I think.
All right.
And if you're going to fight the Swarm, have them invade the damn Pact worlds. Like, let's do something big, right? but there's a lot of reasons not to do it that way.
Yeah.
And so, well, if we are invading this planet, this other new solar system that we create just for this AP, why is this solar system important? Like, what makes it worth playing the adventure? And that's exactly the question that you answered with this whole Mystery Hylax and the temple and all the stuff going on there. So.
There showed that there was also a gap in our, pun not intended, in our knowledge of what the Shirins were and where they came from and what their history was before it's arrived in the Pact Worlds a good 80 some years after the gap ended, and just sort of showed them like, hey, we're bug people. We used to be part of a different bug group. They're evil. We're not, they might come and get you, and they eventually do. But it basically sort of starting in a small place, and the swarm doesn't necessarily need a reason to invade a place. They just, except for they want to eat it. Yeah. But starting again with sort of a small area that I could control the everything about it. Yes, thank you. Paul just showed me a picture of Ed Sheeran, which I think someone has actually photoshopped a red beard on one of our bug people. I'm sure you can find it out there, internet. But we're starting in a sort of small sort of place that I created from scratch. I could control all of the knobs and dials of how they would respond without having to think about, the Pact Worlds it's like 14 galactic entities at least, right? Yes. Something like that. It's a massive. It would have to be a full campaign about the military at that point.
Yeah.
And those are questions that I knew that I could have answered with research, but would have gotten them at least a little bit wrong.
Well, and also because you created your own star system for it, you have control over all the ramifications and consequences.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to blow up Suskalon, you can.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to stop you. Whereas if you're playing in the Pact Worlds, you kind of know you're not going to blow up Absalom Station, right?
Right. Yeah. We have to really be very considerate, or not the word, that's not the word, but very conscientious about what we do with our main setting. And granted, that can be frustrating at times.
Yeah.
But there is a certain logic to it in that, we can't, because not that we can, because we probably will eventually do something like that.
Yeah.
But we just have to consider the ramifications of what that means.
Well,
and whether or not
running a game for your home table and running a game where there's thousands of tables around the world playing in the setting. Like, we can't, if it's our table, we could totally blow up Absalom Station.
Go for it.
That's the game that our players want to play.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people using this setting, and we want to make it open and available. And so somebody goes up and they buy the Starfinder core rulebook tomorrow, and it describes the Pact Worlds for them, and this is their first exposure to it. And then they go and buy an adventure. Like, well, wait a minute, how come this says Absalom Station is blown up when the book is not? Like, I don't get it. And so we have to sort of keep in mind always, for every book is somebody's first game, right?
And then there's organized play to consider too. If they are in our setting, which we have to take that in consideration, take them into consideration, our stuff, and vice versa. So if we blow up Absalom Station, it's gonna have to have ramifications in the organized play too. And there's a certain path that leads down to that can be madness and lead to players getting hurt feelings or whatever, or just sort of getting resentful of us changing stuff.
Well, we're a company that was born out of the Edition Wars, so we kind of have to recognize that. But then so after Attack of the Swarm, you get the chance to pitch your own. Is that and that's Threefold, or is it not? No, that's Sims.
The Sims pitched Threefold Conspiracy. He was like, I want to do something with the Greys and the Reptoids, and we're all like, great, let's do it. So we, as the process is, which you are aware of, we sit around and we bang ideas out, and we sort of try to figure out, and you, me, and Rob McCreary, sort of bang out ideas of what does this like, what is the plot of this, what's going on, and there came a point where And you know what? I don't want to take sole credit for this,
right?
But I remember pitching it as kind of a joke because, and how spoilery we're going to get? I guess that's the question.
Well, the adventure's been out for a couple of months, so I think spoilers, people. This adventure has a huge mystery in it, and we're going to talk about that mystery.
The mystery.
Then you could pause us here or skip to the end.
Skip to the end because this is actually more of a spoiler for almost the entire AP.
Yeah.
There was a thing where I sort of pitched. So it's like, well, let's talk about, what are the Greys and Reptoids doing? Obviously, what they do is they replace people in a lot of ways where they do experiments on people. Let's get to the heart of the system. And this is a sort of a thing that we could do is like, well, someone's going to try to at least take over, the Pact Council, the Pact system government, right? And so I was like, well, what if? And the PCs have got to stop them. Okay, that's a sort of obvious kind of thing. You do an X-Files style thing. But I pitched sort of as partially as a joke, and I was like, this is gonzo. But what if the PCs are clones and don't know it?
Okay.
And Sims took that idea and we ran with it, and then with that and sort of like, okay, well, what's the first adventure? Is like, oh, they're being trained essentially to sniff out shape changers by the Grey. They're in a facility, right? And I was like, okay, well, if we're gonna do this, I feel like I should write it just to make sure we get it right.
Yeah.
To as arrogant as that sounds, but just sort of like, let's talk about.
We say like, this is really important, so we want somebody in house to write it, just because the communication is so much easier. Like,
yeah, true.
You can talk to the developer; he's 3 feet away from you or 6 feet.
Yeah, exactly. But this basically this Chimera mystery adventure is kind of a whole stage dressing, and it's fake. The whole thing is fake, and the PCs don't find that out until the very end. And what we end up to, once I sort of suggest, and I think Sims come up as what we do is every volume we pull the rug out from under the PCs as much as we can. Yeah. So we trick them. Okay, here. Oh, but now you do this, but it turns out these people were not your friends after all. They're secretly Reptoids or what have you. Or this moon base is not here; it's over here. Or like, and then you find out again, just sort of like things are changing. Oh no, there's a third faction in the unseen, which only sort of hinted at in the setting so far, and they're involved as well. And it's a whole mishmash of conspiracies and plots and things working against one another that the PCs are just entangled in and have to figure out. They're the only ones who can do anything about it because they're the only ones who know.
Did you ever read the 9 Princes in Amber series, Rogers?
No, I don't think I have.
There's a really clever conceit in those books, and it's a 5-book series. The first Chronicles of Amber, and it's and the trick is that our protagonist is a prince in this family. And but every book he finds out that a different person is the big bad guy. Like the person that he thinks is the big bad guy in the first book is defeated, but then he finds out pretty quickly around the end of this first book that, oh no, there was some other guy who was behind him, right? And this continues to happen throughout the series. It's a way, but it just reminded what you were describing. But of course, yours is very different in that yours is all about these sort of layers of conspiracy. So it's it's like one layer of the onion is removed, and there's another layer.
Right. Oh my God, it's a bigger onion. I mean, talking what you're saying about Princess of Amber is almost role-playing campaigns in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
Every time you, a lot of APs run that way. You fight someone, you find out that they're just a pawn to someone else, or they're working for somebody else, or they're not even the real bad guy. That actually is just a setup for the next bad guy or the very big bad guy. So. This one definitely is draped in all those layers, that there is no, for at least a bit, there's kind of like no central figure that is controlling everything. Maybe you get hints at it along the edges, and eventually you find out who the mastermind is and get to punch them, which is always good.
Double.
Yeah. So Sims took all this and he wrote all the outlines and he came up with all the other bits that happen in here, and then we again started figuring out who's going to write them. We got Owen, we got you, we got Crystal, we got Vanessa Hoskins, and we got Landon Winkler. so I got all these people together and figuring it all out and getting all the plots, and he organized all that, and I sort of started talking about what's going to happen in the back. Let's sort of give information, but let's not give information. So we had these ideas of these articles that are written in world more than they are anything else, and they're just a mishmash of wrongness.
Yeah, like 3 articles, one on each of the 3 factions.
Yeah,
the Greys, the Reptoids, and the Decepskians.
Yes.
But they're each written by somebody who doesn't really know the truth, right? So it's filled with plot hooks and seeds, so the GM can decide kind of what's true and what's not for their individual tables, which I love.
Yeah, there was the sort of thing. It was like we give information in these books. We talk about setting information and we do that stuff, but how do we present? We want to keep the unseen spooky. We want to keep them mysterious, and so let's just give GMs a bunch of misinformation that they can give to the players or make true if that's what they really want. Yeah. And it all sort of, all of these 3 articles contradict one another left and right. So it's great. It's great to be able to sort of write stuff that's false sometimes.
I had a really good time because I wrote one of them. I wrote the Reptoid one. But I remember reading, because you were like, here's the gray one and it's really great. Do it like this. And I was like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
But what I loved was that the gray one hints that the Greys are actually pawns of the Reptoids. The Reptoid hints that they're actually pawns of the Decepskians. And the Decepskians hints they're actually pawns of the Greys.
Right? It's a rock, paper, scissors whole situation.
Circle of life, man.
Yeah.
And then about halfway into this, because that was the 3rd adventure is the one that I wrote. I don't think it's quite out yet.
It's coming out this month or within a week or so. It's coming out real soon.
But that was like the last thing that I wrote before I became a Starfinder developer.
Yeah.
And Sims was in the middle of transitioning out of Paizo to move back to Austria. And they asked you, I assume that was a Rob and Amanda decision?
I guess so. It was less... I don't know. ask is a weird word, right? It came down to that. It was like it's going to be. Here's what's going to happen. Tundra's going to have to develop these 3 adventures as soon as he sits down. And there's it was a question of which fire we threw you into.
Yeah.
Basically, because we knew that what was coming after Threefold Conspiracy,
which has been sort of stealth announced with the product.
Right. It's a 3-volume high-level AP called The Devastation Arc, and I had already begun the process of that.
Yeah.
And slightly had, because eventually Sims was gone before we fully had to get everything on paper. But then it became, it's like, okay, well then, but also that's only 3 volumes and there's going to be an AP after that. Surprise. Who's gonna outline and write that? So it's either is Tundra gonna just finish off the Threefold and then I'll go ahead and do this next one, or are we just going to have Tandro again from week 2 or whatever it is write an outline for an entire 6-volume AP?
Yeah.
Which is both. Both of those were. I mean, I guess I sort of did the first one, which was sort of come in, start developing adventure paths from volume 4, right?
Yeah.
Or 5. So it was just a question of that, and I think personally we made the right decision. Is sort of that was the writing an entire AP outline was slightly further away from having to develop the next adventure.
Well, and honestly, I'm flipping the tables a little bit here, but I loved the opportunity to write kind of my own outline and get my own ideas out there, and so I found a lot of energy in that. Yeah,
no, that's why I think
getting through the challenge of it all.
Yeah.
And there was absolutely a steep learning curve because, I had to learn kind of how you and Rob and everybody kind of had been doing things, and I learned a lot from that. But the fact that I was writing my own story is what kept me going, right? So yeah. I agree. I think we did the right thing.
It's definitely the right choice in that. And it's just sort of because it can be hard, speaking from multiple experiences, to take someone else's story and basically finish it, right? Because Sims had written out the whole from start to finish the outline for Threefold, and I had to come in the middle and basically take that and move it across the finish line, to use a sports analogy.
Sure.
And it was tricky. It was tricky because there were some things I would look at and was like, well, that's not how I would have done it. But you have to take also, authors are writing to those specs, and it becomes a tricky bit to sort of massage it to a point where I think it ends up being, obviously, personally, I think it ends up being slightly better, but not to say, I'm sure Sims would have done something similar, like taking what the authors have given you and that's what we do. We take what the authors give and we polish it up so that it's the best that it can be.
We kind of end up with two different. We have the version of the adventure that we got, and then we had the version that we might have gotten.
Right. Yeah.
We had the Snyder Cut.
Sure. Yeah. Well, what is is there a famous movie where a director had to come in and finish the direction? I'm sure that's happened so many times. I just can't think of a famous example.
I'm thinking, of course, of Justice League, right? When Joss Whedon came in.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
You're halfway through Justice League.
That's right. Okay, that might be exactly what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that's the infamous Snyder Cut that doesn't actually exist.
Right.
So fans were like, "We want the original version of Justice League." Why? Because the new one sucks. I hate to tell you this, guys, but the old one would have sucked even worse.
Yeah.
But that's not here because Sims are both really great at what you do. But we're just acknowledging that the adventure came out different. It came out different.
Yeah, it would have. I don't think it would have come out like so vastly different. There were just minor tweaks that I had to, that I felt like that I did to make sure that in my brain things flowed better from point A to point B. And Sims may have had some stuff in his head that he didn't necessarily speak of, because when it came down to it, near the end of the development phase, I had to draw up a conspiracy wall in the office to just figure out what was going on. And that's just in the final volume. That final volume is very convoluted in a good way because it is all about unraveling sort of who's who and the big players on a government wide stage. And basically how it all connects and what's important and what's not, and how the PCs find all of those bits of information. Landon gave me just sort of this buffet of plot hooks, basically, like this person's in this person's pocket, this mob boss's pocket for various reasons, and I'm like, okay, great, all this, and here's a website full of conspiracy theories, and why do they think they know the truth of this thing that happened in the past, and a bunch of other stuff that PCs had to pick through. And I just needed to see it, be able to see it all myself, so when I was developing it, I could understand it.
One of the things that we find out pretty quickly as developers is that when a manuscript gets handed over, there's often a lot of unexpected challenges to that manuscript, and it's impossible to know how Sims would have handled those challenges, right?
Exactly.
But now you finished your work on Threefold.
Mm-hmm.
Because
yes,
and you've already moved to Devastation Arc.
Yes,
which is almost done.
I mean, development-wise, it is done, and now it just needs to get edited and put on paper.
It's surprising to many people how long in advance, the production schedule is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it makes me wish that we could be a little bit more nimble as a company.
Yeah.
But there's nothing really to do about it. We get all of our product is printed in China for cost savings reasons. And then it takes months for it to ship to us once it's complete. So this is how it works, and we just have to do it.
We have to work, somewhere around a year in advance from conception stage, at least, and getting a manuscript in. And I always every time I hear about we got to do this, think about the next product, right? And I'm like, but that's so far in the future. Let me see. Let me go and see what the deadlines are and say, authors, give me this stuff by June or whatever. It's not going to say print until next June. Sorry, but we're at least paying on acceptance now instead of print.
Instead of print, the great,
which was definitely helpful for everybody. I think
we're also, this issue of freelancer compensation has been real big around the office. We've talked about it a lot. As developers, we all want to raise that pay. We want it because it's been stuck at kind of 10 cents. At best, 10 cents for a very long time. And and we'd like to reward freelancers more. The finances of the RPG industry are fraught, to say the least. Our games are notoriously underpriced for the amount of work it takes to make them. But customers are really resistant to raising those prices.
Yeah, well.
And it's a challenge that we're still kind of working on.
Yeah. There's a thing that I'm pretty sure I've heard it about other things, but I've always... not always said it, but I've said it a few times about the role-playing game industry, is that if you want to make a lot of money as a sort of independent role-playing game publisher, start with a very lot amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
I messed that up a little bit, but you get the point.
Brandon Blackmore, who runs Blackgate Publishing and offered me my first job writing something professionally. I wrote the only supplement for a cyberpunk Highlander crossover game called Legacy. But he explained it to me like he said, if you want to make a small fortune in gaming, start with a lot.
That's how it goes. That's much better. Cut that part out that I said it, and you put it in your mouth because it makes me sound better. It makes me sound.
But I got that advice back in like 85, like that advice. Yes. 90. That's like 90. Advice.
It's like real estate. There's location. That's will always be true.
Yeah. Can you tell us much about Devastation Arc?
Yeah, I think. I mean, the product pages are up on Paizo, so you can check them out. I got a great trio of writers, and in a certain way, I've got returning authors to me that I work with back on with Against the Anthro and Signal of Scream. So the first volume is Waking the World Seed, and that's written by Jenny Jarzabski, who has done a lot of great work for us and wrote the second volume of Signal Screams. Second volume, The Starstone Blockade, which does sort of, I think, really threaten to take our setting and break it. Was written by our very own Eleanor Farron. Yes. Again, sort of great. There's some really good character stuff in there that was I sort of kind of threw at her by like, stay solve problems on Epsom Station.
I saw the combat maps for that adventure as you were working. That shit blew my mind.
some good stuff. And the final adventure is Dominion's End by the ever prodigious Ron Lundeen, who has written at least nearly every Starfinder AP there is.
Almost every AP. I did not hire him for mine, and I think he pretended to be grossly insulted. Of course,
I'm sure he's got plenty to do.
Yeah, if anyone who knows Ron knows he's just the nicest person in the world. So
super nice. Those three volumes basically sort of pick up at 13th level, and they go all the way to 20th with some fun stuff at 20th level to play through. And again, we talk about high level adventures. The challenge is there of figuring out what that is. In a lot of ways, there's one of the things that we do in one of the volumes is sort of like the PCs don't get to rest. Just keep going. They got to keep going. Because this is a crisis of gross magnitude that needs to be taken care of right away. But it's got some fun little other weird things like holographic carolers. And a look at. I'll go ahead and spoil a couple things because they're, I think, pretty obviously on the product pages. We get to learn more about bantrids, which are one of my favorite species.
They are a favorite in-house.
Yes, for some reason, I don't know why. I happen to. I like them because I happen to write them. Rob likes them for I don't know why, but I think the reason is why they appear is because it was just the two of us sort of talking about this whole thing, and we were like, well, what if it's this? What if it's the bantrids? And we're like, yeah, the bantrids. So the bantrids aren't the bad guys. Don't worry about that. But we get to learn more about their mysterious history.
And for those who are listening and don't remember who the bantrids are, I think they're mentioned in Pact Worlds. Mm-hmm. But the point about them is that they roll around on these sort of roller balls instead of planes. and they don't even have arms. They have like little sort of tentacle things up on the top.
They got little flippery things.
Flippery things. That's it.
Yeah.
And we love them because they race. They roll really fast.
They got to keep going.
And they got to and they must keep swimming. Just keep swimming.
Yeah, just keep swimming. There's some while we get to figure out some stuff, there's also you learn some bad things that happen to the Bantrids, which breaks my heart every time I think about what happened to them. And the big bad in this something that we hinted at all the way back in the Dead Sons AP, the Civ species, which is an ancient, eons old species, long thought to be gone and extinct, but no, they're back, and for some reason.
Now, behind the scenes, this was happening right when we hired our first in-house artist.
Yes, Kent Hamilton. Kent.
And he did our initial concept art for the Civ, and it's still pinned to your wall in the cube, right?
Oh, yeah, it's so good.
It's so good. We were like mind blown that we had somebody to come in. We finally have somebody in-house who can do art for us. We don't have to freelance it. And if we don't like it or we have any comments, we can literally just talk to him over the cube wall.
Yeah.
And it makes it so much better. But then he designed these fantastic alien villains for us with this theology that's just so crazy.
It's so, we gave him basically, Rob and I sort of talked to her, what they should be. We want them to be really alien and weird. And so, but the only thing that we could think of to do was just mash a bunch of animal parts together.
Yeah.
So we just kind of gave him this sort of like all these pictures of animals. We want these for the feet and this for the head and this sort of thing. I think one of the concept pieces is a bit of a microscopic view of a mite or something like that, and it's got this real alien looking face.
Yeah.
And so this and this and this, and he just sort of did it. He synthesized that into something that's makes sense in a way, right?
And also, frankly, terrifying.
Oh God, yeah. Hopefully, hopefully people see them and yeah.
And now your example of a situation in the adventure where the PCs aren't allowed to rest is one of the best things I love about high level play, which is it can be very tempting when you have an adventure and you write it like you write every other adventure, but then the PCs have high level abilities that allow them to circumvent large pieces of that adventure or to turn big problems into small ones, right? Yeah. Like I can teleport, so this blown up bridge isn't really a problem for me.
Yeah.
Or I can follow the villain with spells, so I always know where he is. So I don't have to research because I can just cast divination and find out where he is, and so on. Or I can use Arcane Eye or Mind Probe or a million other high level things. Right. Instead, a good high level adventure requires the use of all of those crazy high level abilities.
Yeah.
That the PCs feel awesome because they have them. Like we could not get through this adventure if we didn't mind probe, teleport, and all of those other, resurrection, all of those other high level abilities. And so the fact that they have a ton of resolve points, and we're getting into mechanics here, so that they can spend 10 minutes to rest maybe. Can they do that in your marathon sequence?
There's a part. Well, I mean, there's repercussions.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. That's good. There's a whole part, and this is all Eleanor's doing. She basically wrote this timeline up, like when the thing happens. Basically you have 30 minutes to do 8 things, right? And what you're going to do first, and then you got to get from point A to point B as well. And again, if you have teleport, you can get there quickly. That saves you time, and lets you to do the thing faster, or and then get to the next crisis without having drawn a gun or whatever. There are points in there too that are about one of the things that another tack to go besides making sort of like let's make teleport and whatnot essential. You also put dilemmas in front of them instead of problems they have to punch, right? There's a thing and here's 2 people and maybe they're both right and you've got to figure that out, or figure out a way to appease everyone without getting civilians hurt and that sort of thing. So you become
the moral dilemma or the problem to solve, and then important choices with significant visible ramifications.
Yeah.
So PCs decide, okay, I've got to do these 8 things, and I'm going to pick these 5, and the other 3 I'm going to let slide.
Right. Yeah.
When they get to the final battle, they can see the consequences of those 3 things they let slide show up in the adventure, and this is what makes the adventure come to life, and it makes PCs not feel like they're being railroaded, right? Which is always a challenge with Adventure Path.
Yeah. You know, I always say there's a certain amount of when you buy an Adventure Path, you are buying into the fact that you're going to get a little bit railroaded here and there.
You're sort of playing in good faith.
You're getting on the roller coaster, right? I like to think of it more of that. It's like, oh, I'm going to be excited, and it's going to be ups and downs, and I'm going to feel, the
theme park.
Yeah, it becomes a theme. Yeah, so, you know that it's fake, but you buy into it.
Right.
Suspension of disbelief.
Yeah. And of course, many tables don't do that. They take our APs and they change them a lot.
Yeah.
And that's great. Like that's
I love it.
Our hobby, right? Like, yeah.
I'm doing it right now.
Are you?
Doing it all the time. I'm running a 2nd edition version of Strange Aeons, and for some people at work, now virtually.
Crafty and
right.
Path for P1.
Yes. And it was actually one of the first. It's pretty much not one of the first, but it was definitely in my first year-ish, 2nd year of editing. So I was going through and editing some of the stuff, and that's also has a special place in my heart because it has it is the last bits of fiction that appear in Pathfinder APs. I got to write one of those stories, and I'm very happy about that. And I basically. Chris Carey, who no longer works with us, was sort of in charge of all that stuff. And at that point, I'd been there long enough to be like, you can give me, here's some of the stuff I've written. Here's some other fiction I've written. And he's like, sure, yeah. Because I think at that point he didn't care too much. But it was, instead of normally those AP fictions are 6 pieces that tell one story, but we decided to do 6 short stories in a sort of Lovecraftian vein because that's what he did.
The fiction for us since then. You did one of the Pact Worlds fiction stories.
Yeah, I did one of those. I did the meet Barsala, meet Dr. B, and then there's a sort of a threefold conspiracy themed one.
Okay.
Sort of an introduction to that I wrote. I think is up as well. They're all up, I think, at this point.
Right on. All right. So before I let you go, what do you do outside of Paizo that you can maybe talk about?
I sit around my house and play video games. But that's not. I do occasional freelance for other companies. I think. Let me think of some things.
Some Green Running projects, but they may not be announced yet.
Well, there is a Green Running. I did write the 6th volume of the Return to Freeport AP, which is out now. It was all out, which was sort of a fun. I got to do some piratey stuff, which was great.
Is that for 5th edition?
No, it was for 1st edition Pathfinder. Yeah.
Oh, Pathfinder.
Yeah. I think that was a project that got at some point onto Owen's plate because it was kickstarted or something like that a long time ago, and it was a while coming out. But I think maybe they had someone drop out from writing that last volume, and Owen came to me, and I was like, sure, I'm only in the middle of writing 2 other APs for Paizo. I'll do it. So I crammed that in there. There's some older stuff. I mean, if you can find any of the Pantheon Press stuff, go for it. Find out that free short games.
Fortune Fool with a resolution system.
Yes, yeah. I'm gonna bring that resolution system back at some point. I want to. There is if you are familiar with the Laundry RPG by Cubicle 7, I wrote an adventure for them a while back it's the As Above So Below collection of adventures.
The Laundry is a occult conspiracy RPG.
It is, yes. It is like Delta Green, a bit more British and a bit more IT oriented.
Yeah. Yes.
I had to do a lot of research. This one also sort of fell into my lap because someone else could do it, and he asked if I wanted to do it. And I was like, sure, what the hell? But I had to read the first Laundry book and kind of.
People that are freelancers or want to be freelancers, I cannot stress enough how much the importance of the reputation of coming through in the clutch can be.
Yeah.
When somebody else doesn't deliver, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't deliver in this business. And then you think, okay, well, who can I go to that can get me this manuscript in a very short amount of time to a quality level that I know I can work with? And they have a short list of people, and to be on that list is you have to earn it. You have to get and to your credit, you've done this for many other people for a long time, and you've made it onto this.
Fair enough. Yeah. I think so. I mean, at that time, that was several years ago. It might have even been more than 5 years ago. I was still not. Now I'm sure they didn't know who I was, but they just needed something to get written, and it was basically that. And I did what I always do when I don't know what kind of an adventure to write. So it's about time travel or about time breaking, which happens. It just might be considered a theme in some of my adventures. It happens in Temple of the Peacock Spirit too. There's a little bit of time weirdness.
Oh, I forgot that you wrote that. That was for Rune Lords, right?
Return of the Rune Lords. Yeah, that was another one where James Jacobs asked me if I wanted to step in for somebody. So again, yeah, I hopefully have by this point a more that kind of reputation of getting things done when they need to get done.
Yeah, that's a great reputation.
I'm trying to think of anything else. There's surely there will be some more projects coming up outside of.
Well, you have a lot of personal pet projects you've been working on for a while.
That's true. And did I tell you that I started another one?
You did.
Recently? Okay.
You didn't tell me what it is, but I do know that you mentioned it. Yeah.
That might not go anywhere specifically because it's also something that I was sort of wanting to work with Crystal Frazier with because it was mostly her idea, and I was like, let's write a game. And then I started writing a game, and then she might be too busy for that. I don't know.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very grateful. Pet your dog for me,
yes.
Which we did not get to see. And thanks to everybody for being so patient with my own here, who decided naturally, as soon as they decided to have an interview, that they had to have the Zoomies here in the but we hope to be. Paizo has started to return. The warehouse staff has gone back to the warehouse, and we are shipping product. We don't have any word yet on when all of us will be back in the office, but our schedule is not changing. All of our product is coming out.
Yep.
And we've got the back half of Threefold Conspiracy coming out over the next few months.
Mm-hmm.
Devastation Arc. I'd love to have you back on to talk about Devastation Arc when that comes out.
Sure.
Okay, fantastic. Everybody else, stay safe, stay home, and stay safe. All right?
And stay gaming.
Stay gaming. Good answer.
No, does that mean anything?